Okay, I want to talk about the state of British politics, and goodness knows there's plenty of subject matter to go on. Before I get into that, just an interesting little fact that's kind of not got a lot of attention except on the Google Doodle today, and that is that the World Wide Web is 30 years old today. 30 years of the World Wide Web. So that's quite a landmark. I'm thinking of that video I made recently on our reliance on technology, so it taps into that. 30 years today. I'm 33, so that's the vast majority of my life. We've been with the World Wide Web. Um, I believe the internet came a bit later. I've heard different years because there's a bit of like a lot of great inventions. There's some debate over the exact origins of it. I believe 1996 is the year most commonly cited. Anyway, that's a pretty significant hallmark. But let me get back down to earth. And yeah, British politics, my goodness. So I've been watching coverage of May's second meaningful vote. And as everyone expected, it failed. The results are, let me just get this correct, 242 members approved, 391 rejected. A significant defeat yet again. Not quite as heavy as the last one. I believe the last defeat was 412 against something like that. But clearly, the Prime Minister's under enormous pressure. I mean, should be under pressure anyway, but to have this much of a lack of confidence in her leadership must be very, if nothing else, Theresa May is tough. I mean, I don't think anyone could dispute that. She's resilient. Some might call that stubborn, but you need that in a prime minister, and she's definitely proven it. I mean, she was even responding to the vote with a clearly broken voice. Um, you could see the strain there. But I think certainly in terms of body language, I think she's handled it very well, and I think something has to be said for that. She's never got angry with reporters or anything like that. She's always kept her composure. So, if nothing else, give her credit for that. My goodness, there's so much to talk about now, and without question, I'm going to overlook some things in this video because it's simply impossible to bring everything that I want to talk about into this. But let me just start with the most pressing issue, which is, of course, Brexit. We now have, what is this, the 12th of March today? That is 17 days. 17 days to that big date, 29th of March, where the Prime Minister keeps insisting we are leaving on that day. My gut feeling is there's going to be something developing in the next 17 days that will mean that date's going to be extended. I think there's just too much unease, too much uncertainty on both sides. Um, I mean, the Prime Minister's between a rock and a hard place, but this isn't just about the Prime Minister. Both major political parties are in a state of civil war right now. I can honestly say, and I don't take any pleasure from saying this, but I can honestly say I've never been more disillusioned with the state of British politics as I am right now. And there's been times, I remember after the 2015 general election, I was very disappointed. I saw Scottish nationalist gains, which concerned me because I'm against Scottish independence. I saw a Tory majority. I am not a Tory. And I saw a party that I had been loyal to for a long time decimated. So I was very depressed after the 2015 general election results. 2017 things changed a bit. But if we just look at Brexit, what options are there now? Well, Prime Minister can extend Article 50. She can call a general election. Um, and she could keep a no deal on the table, which Labour, uh, as Corbyn said, is against. I think no deal would be a disaster. I've heard Tory backbenchers say no deal is better than a bad deal, but my unease about a no deal Brexit is that it would mean that we are going to have to start trade negotiations with 27 member states from scratch. And we are in a disillusioned enough situation as it is. So I just don't see how that's good for the country to have that much uncertainty. Trade negotiations take time. And okay, there are countries to be fair, there are countries that are talking about working trade negotiations with Britain. Australia, Italy, and the United States have all made overtures that are positive. That's great. I welcome any good news, but this is still speculation. No one knows what's going to happen. And frankly, someone put it on BBC News. I don't know if it was an MP or a journalist, but they said that frankly, the Brexiteers have been left us dangling for long enough with this uncertainty. Now they would counter, oh, but we're also in an uncertain situation. To which I would retort, well, yes, exactly. So can anyone honestly say that this has been good for the country? I don't believe another referendum and a general election were two other options. Now, another referendum, part of me, as a big skeptic of Brexit, is tempted by the idea. And I am not 100% against it. My concern about another referendum is, as we've seen by the events of 2014 and the events of 2016, referendums cause bitter divisions. And this country is very divided. Now, to be fair, it would be about the same topic, Brexit, so maybe the divisions wouldn't get any deeper than they already are, anyway. But another referendum posing the question of what a Brexit deal involves, i.e., if that deadline surpasses it, I don't see how anyone could oppose the question. Hard Brexiteers will say, oh, but it's undemocratic, it's not listening to the results. Well, not necessarily. If it was if it was a question not about yes or no, should we leave or stay in the EU, but rather what should be the nature of a Brexit deal. That's not the same as betraying the vote. So I don't think you can argue that another referendum with that sort of question is betraying 17 million people. Because I think there is this arrogant streak with hard Brexiteers where they insist that only their version of Brexit is what 17 million people want. 17 million people want to leave the EU. I think probably a large number have changed their minds, and okay, that could be on both sides. But I refuse to believe 17.4 million people voted for a hard Brexit, i.e., with no deal, and with the lies that they were fed by Mr. Farage and co. Um, frankly, the Brexiteers need to change the record of this is, respect the vote. And I mean, the issue I have with Brexiteers is they cannot seem to conduct an argument these days without one or two things: ad hominem insults, i.e., branding their opponents Remainers, traitors, liberal elite, etc., or basically dismissing everything as Project Fear. What is this Project Fear that they keep coming out with? I mean, if you get into that conspiracy theory, then you're going to say that every single business, every single politician, every single media source, they're all part of one big conspiracy to keep us in the EU. I mean, that's going down the Alex Jones rabbit hole of conspiracy theories. I can understand what I can appreciate is people who voted leave and they're fed up with all of this back and forth and they just want out now. I can understand that. And part of me even wants that. But the reason I'm against, or the reason I'm uneasy about a second referendum, is because, I mean, we did make the decision in 2016. So it would be undemocratic in that sense if the referendum went for staying in the EU and then we stayed in the EU. It would basically be disregarding that 2016 result. But my other big concern about the second referendum, the Scottish nationalists want it. And I think the reason they want it has more to do with setting the precedent for another Scottish referendum. I mean, my goodness, how many referendums can this country have? I think history will show that David Cameron, I mean, I suppose you'd have to give him credit for putting direct democracy to the people because that's what it is. And he's experimented with that more than any other prime minister in my lifetime. But what's it done? All it's done is create divisions on uncertainty. I believe another EU referendum would galvanise Scottish nationalists, and I don't want to see that. I'm against, or I'm very wary of Brexit, but I'm far more wary of the United Kingdom breaking up. I don't want us to leave the EU. I've got a bad feeling about it. But that's still far preferable to the breakup of the United Kingdom. To me, that would be the worst possible outcome. It would be utterly devastating. I don't believe, as some Remain people do, that we're about to enter some big dark void and everything's going to crash and tumble. Um, but here's the thing: I get a little bit tired of the stubbornness of Brexiteers, where they have this tunnel vision whereby they dismiss anyone raising concerns as a remoaner, or they constantly churn out this broken record. Oh, it's Project Fear. People have a right to raise concerns, and it frankly pisses me off that they think that because they won the referendum, they're the only people allowed to say. And that is the attitude they seem to have. I'm not talking about all people who voted leave, but I'm talking about stubborn, hard Brexiteers. They have tunnel vision. And for once, I'd like them to show some humility and accept that maybe, just maybe, this isn't going to be the wonderful situation that they portrayed it to be. Um, so that's Brexit. I mean, I just don't know what the next path should be. Um, Theresa May's deal is far from ideal, but frankly, I don't know what better choices there are. Because to me, no deal would just be the worst outcome in the Brexit context. I just don't see what good can come from it except years of uncertainty. And sure, we will get trade with some countries. But that to me would just be insane that we're tearing up trade deals and starting from scratch when we have perfectly decent trade deals with individual countries. Sure, with the EU, it's totally flawed. Although I will say this, the EU also has to not give the impression it's overbearing, because that's one of the main reasons people voted out. And if the EU starts bullying other European countries and saying, oh, you cannot do trade deals with the British on your own, that will go down very badly. And, I'm no Europhile. I do not like to see that sort of stuff. And the EU would also be making a mistake if they punish Britain for leaving the EU. If they make any overtures to that extent, it's going to seriously backfire. There's other things about the EU that don't help. Emmanuel Macron's sentiments towards an EU superstate are are woefully misguided, and I think Macron has an arrogant streak. He can't seem to see that. Interestingly enough, Merkel's successor could actually be against European federalism. Apparently, she's against Mrs. Kampar, I think her name is. She's Merkel's chosen successor in the CDU anyway, but um, I just feel totally disillusioned with this, and I just don't know. I would say this to Brexiteers: what can you point to say has been a positive step so far? I've seen glimmers of good news, but I mean, I'll give an example. When Nissan and Honda were talking about pulling out of the UK, Brexiteers were in denial. Immediately, it was, oh, this has got nothing to do with Brexit. This was changes in the market. It was going to happen anyway, and they're also decreasing their production in Germany. Well, that might be true, but the CEOs of those companies and the Japanese ambassador specifically mentioned Brexit. He didn't say it was the only reason, but he specifically mentioned it. So I think Brexiteers are incredibly stubborn. When you give facts to them, when you present direct quotations, they just disregard it. So that whole attitude of it's got nothing to do with Brexit, to me, that's an example of stubbornness of certain Brexiteers, where they just refuse to give any ground. They refuse to just acknowledge, well, yeah, maybe there is something in that. They weren't saying that Brexit's the only reason, and yes, there are other market situations going on, but Brexit was one of the reasons cited by the Japanese ambassador. Now, let's put Brexit to the side for a second, which is far from easy to do. I mean, it distracts from everything else, which is another problem of Brexit. We should be focusing, for example, on external threats posed by Russia and China, but that's taken a back seat. We should be vocally backing our Canadian allies in this ongoing rift with China, but that's taken a back seat because of Brexit. Anyway, domestic politics, Labour and Conservative. I'm very interested in this independent group. Definitely, it has a lot of echoes of 1981 and the SDP and Alliance, and then which later, of course, morphed into the Liberal Democrats. I do think there's a very strong case for a strong vocal centrist movement in this country. Um, and I strongly reject this idea that unless you're a true blue conservative or a red flag carrying socialist, then you don't believe in anything, that you somehow lack any values or any sort of beliefs. It's total nonsense. I think there are millions of people in this country who would be sympathetic to a lot of positions of a centrist movement. Now, the issue with the independent group is they're all Remainers and they want a second referendum. So that immediately polarizes the most divisive issue of the day. I think they would maybe be in a stronger position if they had a mixture of Remainers and Leavers. And they were saying if they were pitching for a centrist movement on domestic issues that aren't necessarily Brexit orientated. But because they are Remainers, that's going to polarize people who voted Leave but are centrist minded, i.e., they're not. I mean, a lot of people who voted Leave do swing to the right, but old socialists are not Europhiles either. So I think there actually is many people who would align themselves with, let's say, centre right conservatives and centre left Labour, who also voted perhaps Leave and might be sympathetic to this independent group, but they're put off by that. Of course, the counter to that is if they're mixed, then people would accuse them of having no belief. So, but I'm going to watch them very closely. I understand that by the end of this year, they're going to formulate an actual political party. I think it's inevitable that they're going to morph into the Liberal Democrats. I know Vince Cable has said that won't be the case, but the Lib Dems need to also be realistic. They're a small party now. They were decimated in the last two general elections, and they need to be realistic. Vince Cable has announced he's going to retire, so it seems to me that the best option for the Liberal Democrats would be to merge with the independent group. This will find a lot of common ground, a lot of common ground. And it wouldn't affect the MPs, they would still have their seats. So it makes sense to me for the Liberal Democrats to kind of accept they've had their day and to merge into this new group. How many Lib Dems are there? I think it's nine. So add nine to the 11 independents, then you have 20. That would be large enough to be still a distant third party, but bigger than a small party, put it that way, i.e., where the Lib Dems were in the late 80s. So I'm going to follow this independent group very closely. Just a word about centrism, though. I always say I'm a centrist, that's where I align. That does not mean that I'm uncritical of centrism. One of my main issues with centrism is their political correctness and their pandering to identity politics, not as much as the hard left, but they do it. And I dislike that. And I'd be a bit wary of centrists. I think they're too quiet on issues like Islamist extremism. Um, those are areas that I would be wary on. There'd be areas where I'd be quite well to the left and quite well to the right, where I would maybe not align with centrism on. For example, on the left, I want to see the end of workfare. I think it's pure exploitation, and I think that needs to go. and I don't think the independent group would look at something like that. On the right, I think there needs to be much tougher penalties for gratuitous crime. I think judges need to be more accountable, um, and I think we need to really get real about Islamist extremism. All those areas, I think centrists and the independent group, someone like Chuka Amuna is very politically correct, and that doesn't inspire confidence in me. On the other hand, I think he's a smart guy, and I think he could be a strong leader. He's basically a Blairite, and I believe Tony Blair was the best prime minister of my lifetime. So naturally, I'm interested in them. I'm going to follow them closely, but that doesn't mean I mean, I've signed up to the newsletter, but I'm certainly not in a rush to join them. I'm just going to observe and see what happens. These are interesting times in British politics, but the thing that bothers me most of all right now is that this Brexit thing is just going to steal years from this country. The uncertainty, the divisions are going to dominate British politics for probably a decade, i.e., if we go from 2006, the Brexit vote, to this rumbling on for years from now. And that's just sad. It will feel like a lost decade as far as I'm concerned, because the divisions the country could have done without. And I think David Cameron, when assessing his legacy, I think it will go down that he had good intentions by putting direct democracy to the people, but in retrospect, all it done was made everyone angry and disillusioned, both sides. Anyway, I'm going to round that up. I've covered a lot of issues, and by no means am I settled on any of this. I'm disillusioned. I may look back on this a year, 2, 3 years from now and think I was wrong about that. But that's the situation right now. Thanks for watching.